I remember the day Veronica came into our lives. It was about a year after Mom passed away. Dad was still a bit lost, moving through life like he was walking in a fog. Then Veronica showed up, all smiles and sweet words. Dad thought she was a blessing. I wasn't so sure. "Hey, pumpkin," Dad said one evening, his voice a mix of excitement and nerves. "I want you to meet someone special. This is Veronica." I looked up from my coloring book, eyeing the tall woman standing beside him. She had this big, bright smile, but her eyes didn't match it. They were like little calculators, sizing me up. "Hello, sweetie." Veronica knelt down to my level, her voice too sugary. "I've heard so much about you. Your dad tells me you're the smartest little girl in town." I just nodded, not sure what to say. Dad looked at me, his eyes begging for approval. "Isn't she great, Dakota?" "Yeah, she's nice," I mumbled, turning back to my coloring. I wasn't good at lying, even then. The first few weeks were okay. Dad seemed happier, and Veronica tried to play the part of the caring stepmom. But then I started noticing things. Like how she'd be all nice when Dad was around, but cold and distant when it was just us. One day, she came home with a bunch of shopping bags. "I got you some new clothes, darling," she said, her voice dripping with fake kindness. "I know how fast kids your age grow." I was excited at first, until I tried them on. Everything was way too big. The sleeves hung past my hands, and the pants pulled around my feet. I looked like I was wearing someone else's clothes. "Dad, look," I said when he got home, showing him the oversized clothes. "Veronica got them for me, but they're too big." He just chuckled and ruffled my hair. "She's thinking ahead, honey. You'll grow into them. It's smart shopping." I wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't smart, it was weird. But I didn't. I knew it would just make him sad. School became a nightmare after that. Kids can be mean, and they latched onto my baggy clothes like sharks. "Hey, Scarecrow," they'd shout as I walked by. "Where's the rest of your farm?" I tried to tell Veronica, to ask for clothes that fit. But she just waved it off. "Kids are cruel," she said, not even looking up from her magazine. "You need to toughen up." That's how it went for months. Dad was in his own world, happy with Veronica, and I was, just there. The girl with the too big clothes, and a stepmom who couldn't care less. "Veronica, can we get some clothes that fit me better?" I asked one day, trying to sound brave. "The kids at school make fun of me." She looked at me, her eyes cold. "You need to learn to be grateful," she snapped. "I'm doing my best here. You could at least try to appreciate it." I didn't know what to say to that. It felt like no matter what I did, it was wrong. I was wrong. That night, I heard them talking. Dad was saying how great Veronica was with me, how lucky we were to have her. I wanted to scream, to tell him she wasn't great, she wasn't even nice. But I didn't. I just lay there in bed, feeling small and alone, listening to them laugh and talk in the kitchen. I remember this one morning, Dad had to leave early for work. He kissed my forehead, saying, "Dakota, be good for Veronica, okay?" I nodded, though inside, I was dreading another day alone with her. As soon as the door closed, Veronica's smile vanished. "Get dressed. We're going shopping," she said, her voice sharp. In the car, I tried to make conversation. "Can we get some jeans? Maybe a few tops that fit?" She glanced at me, her eyes cold. "You'll wear what I buy, and you'll be thankful. Got it?" At the store, it was the same old story. She picked out clothes that were way too big. When I protested, she snapped, "Stop whining. You're lucky I'm spending money on you at all." Back at home, I tried to alter the clothes to fit better. Veronica caught me and lost it. "What do you think you're doing? Ruining perfectly good clothes." "I'm just trying to make them fit," I mumbled. "You're ungrateful. Do you know how many kids would kill to have a stepmom like me?" I wanted to say, "Not many, I bet." But I kept quiet. Arguing with Veronica was like talking to a brick wall. A few weeks later, she joined the school parent council. It was her new stage, and she played her part perfectly. I overheard her talking to other parents at a school event, her voice dripping with fake concern. "It's so hard, raising someone else's child," she sighed. "But I just love her like my own." The other parents ate it up. "You're such a saint," one of them said. "Taking on such a big responsibility." I felt sick listening to her. At home, it was a different story. If I left a cup on the table or forgot to make my bed, she'd go off. "Look at this mess. Your mother would be ashamed." One night, I tried to talk to Dad about it. "Veronica's different when you're not around," I said, hoping he'd listen. He shook his head, a tired look on his face. "She's doing her best, honey. You need to give her a chance." "But Dad." "No buts. She's your stepmom now. You need to respect her." It was like talking to a statue. Dad wouldn't hear a word against Veronica. I felt so alone, like I was trapped in a nightmare and couldn't wake up. Life with Veronica was like walking on eggshells, never knowing when she'd snap. I was counting down the days until I could leave for college and start my own life. But then, everything changed again. It was a Tuesday morning, just like any other. Dad was rushing around, getting ready for work, and I was trying to avoid Veronica's morning mood. Suddenly, Dad clutched his chest, his face twisted in pain. "Dad!" I screamed, rushing to him. Veronica came running in, her usual mask of concern back in place. "What's happening?" "I don't know, he's in pain." I was panicking, tears streaming down my face. Veronica was on the phone in seconds, calling for an ambulance. But it was too late. Dad was gone before they even got there. The next few days were a blur. Relatives I hadn't seen in years came pouring in, offering their condolences. Veronica was the grieving widow, perfectly playing her part. She'd cry on cue, telling everyone how much she loved Dad, how she didn't know how she'd manage without him. At the funeral, she gave a eulogy that would have won an Oscar. "He was the love of my life," she sobbed into the microphone. "And I will miss him every day." I stood there, numb, watching this performance. I wanted to shout, to tell everyone it was all an act. But I couldn't. I just stood there, feeling more alone than ever. After the funeral, once everyone had left, Veronica's mask slipped. We were alone in the house, just the two of us. She turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. "Now that your father's gone, things are going to change around here," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You're going to learn to respect me." I was still in shock from Dad's death, and her words felt like a slap in the face. "What are you talking about?" I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't play dumb with me, Dakota," she hissed. "Your father's not here to protect you anymore. And I'm not going to put up with your attitude." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My father had just died, and all she could think about was herself. "You're unbelievable," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "He was your husband. How can you be so cold?" She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, please. Your father was a means to an end, nothing more. And now that he's gone, I'm in charge. You'd do well to remember that." I stared at her, feeling a mix of rage and despair. She was right about one thing: Dad wasn't here to protect me anymore. I was on my own with this woman who saw me as nothing but a nuisance. Life with Veronica after Dad's death was unbearable. She turned the house into a prison, and I was the unwilling inmate. I knew I had to get out, but I didn't know how. That's when Aunt Lucy stepped in. One evening, Aunt Lucy came over. She was Dad's younger sister, a feisty woman with a no-nonsense attitude. She had heard about Dad's passing and came to see how I was doing. But when she saw the way Veronica treated me, she was furious. "This is no way to treat a child, Veronica," Aunt Lucy said, her voice stern and unwavering. Veronica just rolled her eyes. She's not a child anymore, Lucy. She needs to learn discipline. Aunt Lucy wasn't having any of it. Discipline? Is that what you call this? She's practically a prisoner in her own home. I remember sitting there, watching them argue, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. Aunt Lucy was taking my side, something no one else had done since Dad died. Listen, Veronica, I'm not going to stand by and watch you treat her like this, Aunt Lucy continued. She's coming with me. Veronica laughed, a cold, cruel sound. And what makes you think you have any say in this? I'm her guardian now. Aunt Lucy's eyes narrowed. We'll see about that. I'm not going to let you ruin her life. That night, Aunt Lucy took me to her place. It was a small, cozy house, nothing like the cold, imposing one I'd been living in with Veronica. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt safe. You're going to stay with me from now on, Aunt Lucy said, sitting me down at her kitchen table. I've spoken to a lawyer. We're going to fight for your custody. I was overwhelmed. But Veronica said she's my guardian. Aunt Lucy shook her head. She may be your guardian for now, but that doesn't mean it's permanent. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. The legal battle was tough. Veronica fought tooth and nail to keep me, not because she cared, but because she wanted control. But Aunt Lucy was a fighter, and she had a good lawyer. After months of back and forth, the court finally awarded custody to Aunt Lucy. Moving in with Aunt Lucy was like stepping into a new world. She was kind and caring, the complete opposite of Veronica. She encouraged me to pursue my interests and supported me in everything I did. Life's too short to be miserable, she'd say. You've got to find what makes you happy and go for it. I took her advice to heart. I started doing better in school, made new friends, and began to feel like a normal teenager again. Aunt Lucy was more than just a guardian, she was a mentor, a friend, a beacon of light in the darkness that had been my life. Living with Aunt Lucy gave me the stability and love I needed to heal from the years of neglect and emotional abuse I'd suffered under Veronica. For the first time, I started looking forward to the future, dreaming about what I could become. It was the beginning of a new chapter, a new life, and I was determined to make the most of it. Years had passed since I last saw Veronica. I was now working at a reputable firm, forging my own path. The past seemed like a distant memory until one ordinary day, my phone rang, displaying an unknown number. Dakota Harrison speaking, I answered, expecting a routine work call. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, clinical. Hello, Ms. Harrison, this is Nurse Jenkins from St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about your mother. She's been admitted here. A wave of confusion hit me. My mother passed away years ago, I corrected, my voice tinged with surprise. The nurse quickly clarified. I apologize for the confusion. I meant your stepmother. She's listed you as her next of kin. My mind raced. Why would Veronica list me? After everything? What happened to her? I asked, a mix of curiosity and old resentment bubbling up. She's had a serious fall and requires surgery. She's been asking to see you, the nurse explained. I was torn, a whirlwind of emotions clouding my judgment. I'll think about it, I said, ending the call. That evening, I shared the news with Aunt Lucy. Her reaction was a mix of concern and disbelief. Why would she ask for you after all this time, and after all she did? I don't know, I replied, feeling a turmoil of emotions. Part of me wants to see if she's changed. But another part of me remembers the pain she caused. Aunt Lucy gave me a reassuring look. You don't owe her anything, Dakota. Remember that. The next day, driven by a strange sense of closure, I found myself at the hospital. Walking into Veronica's room felt like stepping into a forgotten world. She looked frail, a shadow of the formidable figure she once was. Her eyes brightened when she saw me. Dakota, my dear, you came. Veronica's voice was weak, but laced with the same old theatricality. I'm here because I was curious, I stated plainly, maintaining a distance. Dakota, I know I wasn't the best to you, but deep down, I've always loved you, she said, her voice quivering. I looked at her skeptically. The years hadn't softened my memories. Loved me? You have a strange way of showing it. Veronica reached out, her hand trembling. I made mistakes, but I am alone now. I need help, and you're all I have left. Her words, meant to tug at heartstrings, left me cold. You're alone because of the choices you made, Veronica, not because of circumstances. She persisted, her eyes pleading. Please, Dakota, I have nobody else. I do love you, you have to believe me. I studied her for a long moment. The woman who had tormented my childhood was now lying here, claiming love. It was hard to digest. I'll hear what you have to say, I finally said, not committing to anything but curious enough to stay. But don't expect me to forget the past so easily. Sitting across from Veronica in the stark, sterile hospital room, I could hardly reconcile this frail figure with the woman who had once so masterfully controlled our household. Yet, as she began to speak, the familiar undertones of manipulation in her voice were unmistakable, reminding me that some things never truly change. Dakota, she started, her voice quavering, I've made a mess of things since your father passed. The inheritance, it's all gone. Her admission didn't surprise me. Gone? How? I asked, though a part of me didn't want to hear the sordid details. I wasn't wise with the money, she confessed, avoiding my gaze. Bad investments, debts, it's all squandered. I shook my head in disbelief. This was the woman who used to preach about prudence and responsibility, and you're telling me this why? Veronica looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. The doctors say I need surgery, but I can't afford it. I have no insurance left. So, what do you expect me to do about it? I asked, feeling a mixture of anger and incredulity. I need your help, Dakota. I need you to pay for the surgery, she said, the tone of her voice shifting from plea to expectation. I couldn't help but laugh, albeit bitterly. After everything you've put me through, you really think I'd help you? She tried to play the sympathy card again. You're my family, Dakota. The only one I have. Family? I retorted. You never treated me like family. Why should I start now? Her demeanor changed then, the mask of the frail, sick woman slipping. You owe me, Dakota. I took care of you when your father died. You call that care? You made my life miserable. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. Ungrateful child, she hissed, her face contorting into a scowl. I should have thrown you out when I had the chance. And why didn't you? I challenged her. Because I thought there was something in it for me, she admitted with a sneer. But you owe me, and you're going to pay, one way or another. Her threat was as clear as it was desperate. You're threatening me? After all these years, you still think you can control me? I'm not just threatening, Dakota. I'll sue you if I have to. I'll claim alimony, emotional distress, whatever it takes. She spat out, her voice filled with venom. Go ahead and try. I shot back, standing up. You won't get a single penny from me. She was seething with rage now. You'll regret this, Dakota. I'll make your life hell again. After my meeting with Veronica, I was seething with anger and disbelief. I couldn't fathom her audacity, her sheer nerve. I vented to Aunt Lucy over a cup of strong coffee in her cozy kitchen. Can you believe that woman? I raged, slamming my mug down. After all these years, she's still trying to control me, to squeeze me for every penny. Aunt Lucy, ever the rock, shook her head in disgust. She's a snake, Dakota. Always has been. Think she can just waltz back into your life and demand money? It's ludicrous. I was pacing now, my heart racing. She's threatening to take me to court, Lucy, for alimony, of all things. Let her try. Aunt Lucy snorted. She won't get a dime. You're not responsible for her mess. But Veronica was true to her word. A few weeks later, I was served with papers. She was suing me for alimony, claiming she was entitled to it after years of caring for me. It was laughable. In court, Veronica played the frail, wronged woman. "Your Honor, I took this girl in when her father passed," she said, her voice oozing fake sincerity. "I provided for her, and now she's abandoning me in my time of need." I could hardly believe the gall. When it was my turn, I stood, my hands trembling with a mix of nerves and anger. "That's a lie, Your Honor. She made my life a living hell. My aunt here has been my guardian and support for years." The judge looked over his glasses at Veronica. "Is this true, Mrs. Harrison? Were you not this girl's legal guardian?" Veronica faltered, her facade cracking. "Well, legally, no. But morally, I was her." "Morally?" I cut in, unable to contain my frustration. "There was nothing moral about the way you treated me." The judge reviewed the case, his expression stern. After considering the testimonies and the fact that Ms. Harrison's aunt was her legal guardian for the latter years, this court finds no basis for alimony. Claim dismissed. Veronica's face twisted into a mask of rage and disbelief. "This isn't over, Dakota," she spat as we left the courtroom. But it was over. As Aunt Lucy and I walked out of the courthouse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Veronica's last attempt to control me had failed. I was free from her grasp, once and for all. "You did good, Dakota," Aunt Lucy said, squeezing my hand. "She can't hurt you anymore." I nodded, feeling a surge of relief and newfound strength. "I know. It's finally over." That day marked the end of a long, painful chapter in my life. Veronica had no hold over me anymore. I had faced her in court and won. I was free to live my life on my terms, without the shadow of her manipulation looming over me. The courthouse steps behind me felt like a bridge between my troubled past and a hopeful future. Aunt Lucy and I headed to a small cafe nearby, a place that had become our spot for post-court discussions. "So, it's finally over," I said, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. "I can't believe after all these years, I'm finally free of her." Aunt Lucy nodded, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and relief. "You stood up to her, Dakota. That took guts. You've come a long way from the scared little girl you once were." I smiled, a genuine sense of accomplishment washing over me. "Yeah, I guess I have. It's just, I never thought it would end like this." "It rarely does," Aunt Lucy said, taking a sip of her tea. "But the important thing is it did end. You can finally put Veronica and all that mess behind you." Her understanding and support were like a beacon in the dark. "Thanks, Lucy. I don't know what I would have done without you." She smiled warmly. "That's what family is for. And remember, you've got a whole life ahead of you. A life that's yours to shape." We spent the rest of the afternoon talking about future plans, my work, travel dreams, and personal goals. For the first time in a long while, I felt genuinely excited about what lay ahead. As I walked home that evening, the city lights sparkled a little brighter, and the air felt a little fresher. I realized that for the first time in my life, I was truly free. Free from Veronica's shadow, free from the fear and the pain she had caused. Back in my apartment, I stood by the window, looking out over the bustling city. This was my world now, a world full of possibilities. I thought about everything I had overcome, the battles I had fought, and the strength I had found within myself. I was no longer the victim of my past, but the architect of my future. I decided to start a journal, to document this new chapter in my life. As I penned down my first entry, I felt a sense of peace and optimism. The road ahead would have its challenges, but I was ready to face them head-on. "Here's to new beginnings," I whispered to myself, closing the journal with a sense of finality. Veronica's chapter in my life was closed, but mine was just beginning. I was ready to write my own story, one filled with hope, resilience, and the freedom to be who I truly was.